Peace to everybody. This story is about Boy George's complicated thoughts after watching Michael Jackson documentary Leaving Neverland. And as you can see here, the picture is Boy George and Michael Jackson. Boy George is openly gay, and I like his music along with Culture Club. The British singer talks about his complicated feelings after watching the controversial HBO docuseries and what it's missing. Boy George dropped by the Watch What Happens Live clubhouse and pointed out the one key thing that journalists have been criticizing about the recent Leaving Neverland documentary regarding Michael Jackson. So there was something that was missing that nobody even talked about, and he decided to go to the clubhouse to watch the documentary of Leaving Neverland. I think one of the things that isn't in any of those documentaries is the word alleged. Boy George told Andy Cohen it's just taken almost for granted that this is what happened and therefore we all should accept it. Yeah, so in the documentary, the word alleged was never used in there, so they just decided to make it all one sided about James Safechuck and Wade Robson, who admitted of being liars. In this era, listening to and believing victims, it's put many people in an awkward position because the documentary never did present any other side of the story than the one of its two central figures and alleged victims of abuse, James Safechuck and Wade Robson. Yeah, so that's what it was mostly about. It was all one sided. They're the alleged victims of abuse, and no, they're not. They lied because when Michael Jackson was on trial, Wade Robson said, "Oh, Michael never did anything to me." But then when Michael passed away, he turned around and said, "Oh, Michael sexually abused me." No, he did not, because Michael was a good person. He never harmed any of them. That's why they admitted to being liars. As such, while the stories were horrific by any standards, they were not corroborated in any substantial way. And unfortunately, he's not here to defend himself, Boy George said of Jackson. Yeah, so Michael Jackson's not here to defend himself. So that's why Wade Robson and James Safechuck, they were dragging his name through the mud, tarnishing his legacy because he was the king of pop and they couldn't stand it. So they decided to lie on Michael Jackson, saying, "Oh, he sexually abused me." First of all, I that's a lie. Second of all, where is their alleged police report? I'd like to see that one. But since there was no police report of them being sexually abused, Michael Jackson was innocent the whole time. His family, however, is still here, and they swiftly condemned the documentary and threatened to sue HBO if it was aired. Jackson was never found guilty on any of the charges of child sexual abuse brought against him and maintained his innocence until his death. Yes, and now, of course, the Jackson estates, they are going to sue HBO for no matter what. And of course, Michael Jackson maintained his innocence until his death, so he was innocent. And then Wade Robson and James Safechuck are going out here telling lies to people uh, and everything else, and that's when the people were believing them. I don't believe any of those gentlemen because they're liars. And that's what leaves viewers of Leaving Neverland uncomfortable yet uncertain at the same time. What I think is really interesting about that documentary is it hits you with so much information, but you're left with nothing to say that's useful. Boy George said, "You watch it and you just go, I don't know what I can say now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so he's speechless against this because of all the one-sided part of James Safechuck and Wade Robson, and it's just left people uncomfortable about this one-sided story of those two, and people are just really wondering why are they lying. And there was nothing there to be useful except all lies. While Boy George and Michael Jackson both enjoyed tremendous success throughout the 1980s, the British singer admits he didn't have any sort of relationship with Jackson. But I was a massive fan, like most people, he said. Yeah, so he didn't have no kind of relationship, or I mean, no kind of friendship with Michael Jackson. So he was just a big fan, like anybody else is. And of course, Michael Jackson was a tremendous success because he enjoyed it. So did Boy George. It's difficult, he continued, about the documentary. You don't want to disrespect the people that are telling their story, but you also don't want to kind of disregard the fact that Michael Jackson isn't around to say, right, one way or the other, Cohen finished. So as long as he's not around to defend himself, he can't tell Wade Robson and James Safechuck, look, you guys are lying on me. Why? He's not here to defend himself. And so now, with Michael being gone, the Jackson estate, his family, friends, they're telling their side of the story. Say, look, this is not true. They believe Michael Jackson. And that's why Leaving Neverland has been one of the more controversial releases of the #MeToo era. Jackson was brought up on charges of child sexual abuse multiple times and never found guilty. Both Robson and Safechuck testified on his behalf while he was alive. So those two testified on his behalf while he was alive, saying, "Oh, he never did this to me." But then all of a sudden they turn around and say, "Oh well, he did this, he did that." No, that's not true, because once on the police, or I should say on the court records, that he never did anything, that's where it should have been stayed at. Not going around lying saying, "Oh well, he did this and did that." No, because the court documents everything. They explain this as part of their healing process in a documentary, but without any interview subjects on Jackson's behalf or even commentary from Jackson himself in his defense. The film came across too many as incredibly one-sided, and yes, that is true, because it all became one-sided with the lies. And as soon as Jermaine can get out of the music business for a little while, he's gonna do a documentary about Leaving Neverland, and it won't be one-sided either. It'll be two-sided this time. So that's one thing Jermaine Jackson is willing to do. That just leaves viewers, as Boy George put it, a little unsettled, and it did nothing to resolve the decades-long debate as to whether or not Jackson did these things he's been accused of doing. His defenders saw nothing to change their minds, while his distractors saw even more evidence. Yeah, so it was still a little unsettled, and it did nothing to resolve the decades of it. Every time he went to court for child sexual abuse, he was always found not guilty. And after what Wade Robson and James Safechuck did, that was wrong of them, because those two need to be in prison for a very long time for lying and dragging his name through the mud. And a lot of people, like Boy George, are left with mixed feelings. It was a lot of disturbing information to process, but without proper journalistic due diligence, it just feels like another piece of evidence brought into the mix rather than a conclusion. Yeah, so that's what it was about. It was the evidence brought into the mix, but there was no alleged police report saying, oh, Michael did this and Michael did that, because that's not true. They had lied through their teeth the whole time, those two. And it's just sad that Michael Jackson's name has to be dragged through the mud every single time by those two. And sooner or later, somebody's going to grab them and make them tell the truth that Michael Jackson never did these things to them, because it was all a lie that they told, because it was all about the money. He wanted the money from Michael Jackson's children, which Wade Robson and James Safechuck will never get, because Michael Jackson has always put his family first. Never those two, because they are not family members. Leave your comments below. I am out.